I've been known as the Terrorbox guy for quite a while now, and I've decided to try and expand my horizons by moving to the closest thing possible, Flareon Box. I'm going to be calling it Dog Box this video, and I'm not going to lie to you guys, this deck has some incredible matchup spreads. I don't know what you guys are doing online, I'm not going to lie. But this deck has been feeling great for me in testing, and I'm really enjoying playing it, and I genuinely think it does have the capabilities to become the best deck in format, as it just has so many options in so many different matchups and has such a good matchup spread. And today we're going to walk over those matchup spreads and the deck lists and what I think about the Dog Box. So let's get right into it. So today we're just going to be going over a short intro to the Dog Box and the deck list that I have been running. I ran an online tournament because I didn't really feel comfortable explaining the deck just yet, so I decided to play a tournament, and the tournament went quite well, I can't lie. And then we'll be going over some of the matchups that are the big ones of this format, and then some techs and final thoughts of the actual deck. So let's get into the first actual slide, which would be the introduction. You guys can read this, but yeah, I'm just going to be speaking about the deck for a second. And Dog Box is just a really flexible and versatile deck that rewards meta knowledge, and just like Terrorbox, it rewards creativity, smart sequencing, and making sure you know what you have access to at all time. And I genuinely think that this deck does have the potential to become BDIF with just how much it actually has in the deck and all the potential techs it has. And I really do think if there is one deck in the format that's got that dog in it, it is this deck. It has such good matchups against all of the big decks in the format right now, like Grimst, like Dragapult, like Godof, maybe, and it shouldn't be losing to any of those, also like Raging Bolt. It's really not a bad deck that has a lot of potential and a lot of answers to much of the meta. So here are the lists that I have been playing. Shout out to Lavenright, I kind of stole his list for the online tournament. This is the list that I ended up playing to the online tournament, and this is my current list and what I have been running IRL. So let's take a look at the current list, as I'm not going to be touching up too much on this list, as the only thing that I really did with this list was play the online tournament. Ever since that, I've been playing this list. So the idea with this deck is be able to go in that 1-2-3 kind of prize map, or 2-2-2 if you're able to, thanks to the Briar. So a lot of you guys that play Terrorbox, you'll know a lot about the Briar math and how that can help your pricing a lot. So against decks like Joltik, if they attack with the Joltik, you can just take that out and then go 1, 2, and then 3 there, as that deck loves to go 2, 2, 2. So they are very easy ways to actually win a lot of matchups, like Raging Bolt, like Terrorbox, like Joltik Box, where Briar can just help you with that 1-2-3 kind of math. If they never put down a 2-prizer on their first turn, then you don't really mind, because you're just going to go Briar towards the end of the game. And yeah, so this deck is, I'd argue, a little bit better than Terrorbox right now. Terrorbox is quite countered by the Shaman and doesn't have too much way to play around the Shaman, whereas against the Flareon deck, as long as you show one of your Eevees, then usually they're not going to bench the Shaman, because this deck isn't known for playing the Water Ogerpon, and that's when you can come in on your second turn, bench the Waterpon, and get a Torrential Pump up and running on that turn. So the nice thing with this deck is basically that they don't expect the Waterpon, so you can get away with Shaman being in the format, because if they see the Eevee, they see the Flareon, they see the Leafeon or Sylveon, whatever, then they're not going to be like, right, I gotta bench Shaman, because this deck doesn't do bench damage, right? The only thing is Angelite, which shuffles Pokemon, but Shaman doesn't prevent that, so they're not going to be prioritizing that Shaman. They're going to be prioritizing setting up their board and getting multiple attack setups so that we can't shuffle them back with the Angelite attack off of Sylveon. So against decks like Dragapult, like Godof or Grimst, we can really utilize Ogerpon very often and get a lot of sneaky little torrential pumps up in the early game, and that really does help our 2-2-2 prize mapping. Regarding the Eevee spread, Flareon is just a great attacker into a lot of the matchups, as Burning Charge lets you set up multiple attackers on the bench and lets the deck run consistently and very smoothly throughout the entirety of the game. Thanks to Burning Charge, we're able to chain attackers quite easily, and that is another reason why this deck is so good, because Disruption doesn't hurt it as much as it hurts Terrorbox. Terrorbox has to set up attackers on a turn-by-turn basis. For example, in Terrorbox, you're going to go Waterpon, then you're going to go Terrapagos, then you're going to go Pikachu or Clefairy or whatever, whereas this deck doesn't have to worry about setting them up on turn 1, on turn 2, on turn 3. It can kind of go, alright, I'm going to attack with Burning Charge turn 1 with Flareon, and I'm going to, off of that, set up my Terrapagos or my Sylveon, and usually Flareon and Sylveon in these Pokemon don't die in one hit. For example, against the Dragapult matchup, they don't have a way to one-shot the 270 HP Flareon. So these Pokemon have a lot more board presence than in Terrorbox because of the higher HP numbers, and it just lets you kind of get away with multiple attacks per Pokemon. So I am really enjoying this deck. We also have great terrors that we have access to, such as our Terrapagos. So if we don't have access to the Flareon or the other Eevees, we can just get up our Turtle and start attacking with him. So honestly, there are a lot of games where you don't even need your Eevees. You kind of end up just going, alright, I'm going to attack with Terrapagos, I'm going to attack with Lily's Clefairy, I'm going to go back into Terrapagos. One of these matchups would be against Raging Bolt, where you can kind of just go, alright, cool, I'm just going to go Terrapagos, and then I'm going to go straight back into my Clefairy to take 2 on each of that, and then at the end of the game I'm going to maybe use a Carnelian to close out the game, or just another Terrapagos to close out the game there. And another thing would be against Dragapult, where you're just going to be going Water Ogerpon into a Clefairy and probably a second Clefairy, but something that's actually better than attacking with Clefairy would be attacking with the Sylveon, as you can just have Clefairy on the bench, and then you can use Magical Charm to one-shot your opponent's Dragapult, because that's doing 160 times 2, which is 320. And because of that, we're one-shotting Dragapult, which is great, and they don't have that option to just one-shot us back without Gust. So it does give us a lot more time to actually get comfortable into the game and set up our board state properly. Alright, so that is the deck list. We can touch on a few of the other things, but honestly, you guys should kind of understand and get the gist of each of these cards. Obviously, Flareon is just a great attacker in general. Leafeon is mainly for that Grimst matchup and the Garchomp matchup, although Garchomp isn't really that big of a deck right now, but it is also somewhat decent in the Dragapult matchup, as its attack does 230 and then also heals 100 from each of your benched Pokemon. So against Dragapult, when they go maybe 200 into your Flareon, you can then bring up the Leafeon, you can swing, or maybe you can go Boss into a Fez, you can take the knockout 230, and then you can heal 100 from your Flareon, and all of that residual damage off of your little guys that the Dragapult might have spread to, which is also quite strong, although in that matchup usually we are just trying to go 2-2-2 as fast as possible, and not give Dragapult enough time to set up those checkmate board states with our Sylveon and our Clefairy. Alright, so moving on, we have the early game and the mid to late game stages of the deck. So this deck is still a bit of a reactive deck, as you aren't too certain which attackers you're actually going to be using until you are certain for which matchup you are versing. So it is still quite reactive in the early game as the setup, but in the mid game then it's not really reactive, as you have a lot more board presence than Terrorbox does. And regardless of that, you're going to be wanting to go first all the time basically. There's no reason to go second, and from that you can try, establish your Rotom and start establishing your board. You'll want obviously your double Hootoots on the bench to knock down hand, so you can get your Terrors up and running on your second turn and start putting on pressure. If you have Terror in hand, it is sometimes correct not to put into bench against decks like Raging Bolt, because it is possible for them to, be able to gust that guy up with Prime Catcher and then take a 2 prize there, and from there the matchup does become a little bit scary. But against Evo decks, you'll either prioritize Burning Charge to put pressure on your opponent while establishing a better board state, so that you aren't just susceptible to getting Unfair Stamped or Ionoed. But the thing is, Unfair Stamp is kind of fading away right now, as Dragapult is running the Neo Up Energy Ace pick as the ace pick of choice nowadays. But Burning Charge is still a great attack, and if they do have a bench Shaman, you're probably going to be Burning Charging anyway. But it is also sometimes nice to just get that Burning Charge 130, and then the next turn, out of nowhere, they're not going to be benching the Shaman now, because they aren't going to be seeing your Waterpon, and then from there you can go bam, Waterpon, right? And against decks like Dragapult, which usually don't have a Dragapult up by that second turn, then you can go 120 to a bench and 100 to the active, taking out 2 prize cards, which is super nice against that deck, because then from there you're going to be going down to 3 prize cards, and then all you need is just a Briar knockout onto a Dragapult with either the Sylveon or one of your other terrors. So There is a lot of times where you just go Burning Charge to bait your opponent and not putting a Shaman down as well, and then you go into the Water Pond, but sometimes it is just correct to go straight into Water Pond, as long as you don't show it in the beginning of the game. If you do bench it early, then a lot of the times they're going to reactively bench the Shaman, so make sure you show them against the Evo decks, make sure you show them a Eevee, to try and make sure they don't bench that Shaman, and from there you can go on to using your Water Pond. And yeah, like I said, unlike Terror Box, the mid to late game is a little bit less reactive, as you should know what matchup you're going against and the prize mapping for each of those and what dogs you'll be prioritizing in the matchup. For example, against Grimst, you'll focus on the Leaf Dog, and just like Terror Box, thanks to Noctowl, we have constant access to our deck, and this is our main strength, so I would always recommend having a Hoot Hoot on the bench as the game progresses. I would also recommend having Fez on the bench, and Mew, we do play Mew, as you'll have quite a few liabilities on the bench at this point, so the Mew plus the Fez combo is just a great draw engine in this deck. Unlike Terror Box, your attackers stay on the board longer, so this deck is a little bit less prone to being disrupted, as we don't have many discard or energy attacks. There are many matchups where we can kind of just sweep the entire game with a single dog. Sylveon is just a crazy card that can get you out of insane situations. Like the amount of times I have been down by 1 to 4 prize cards and Sylveon just comes in, we rip an Iono to 1, rip an Angelite plus Countercatcher, and just shuffle all of their cards back into their deck. It is really insane, as now they're stuck with 1 card, no access to Fez, because we didn't take a knockout, we shuffled all of their Pokemon back into the deck, and now they have no attacker for the next turn. So Sylveon is a really good, oh no, I'm about to lose, Angelite, right? So it is a great card that can get you out of insane situations, and the amount of times I have been able to get myself out of these situations with the Fairy Dog is crazy. Moving on, let us talk about the tournament. So this was a 130 person tournament. I ended up placing 3rd out of 130, which wasn't bad considering this was my first online tournament with the deck, and the deck felt really solid. The list that I played didn't have the Water Pond, however afterwards there was a lot of situations where in these matchups I would have loved the Water Pond. For example, against Garchomp I would have loved Water Pond. There was a situation against Raging Bolt as well which I would have loved a Water Pond, and then same as Yanmega would have loved Water Pond. But regardless, we didn't have it. Raging Bolt was quite easy. We were able to take, I'm pretty sure, the first knockout, and from there just chain together attacks, and they weren't able to keep up with our 2-2-2 prize mapping. And another great thing is if you are in a single prize board state and they bench a Grass Ogerpon, a lot of times you can just go Counter Catcher into that Grass Ogerpon and then go Burning Charge into that Grass Ogerpon, because you're doing 260 damage to it and attaching 2 energy to your bench Pokemon. So it's 2 prizes, 2 energy, and it is just a great attack, which is something that I love to do against that matchup, as long as they do bench the Ogerpon. If they don't bench the Ogerpon, then you kind of have to go a Carnelian, and that does feel a little bit worse. But if you don't have access to that, you can always just go Crispin Countercatcher and take 2 that way, or Countercatcher plus Water Pond and take 2 that way. As long as you're taking the first 2, you should be okay. And even if you take the first knockout, it doesn't matter, because then they're gonna go 2, then you're gonna go 2, they're gonna go 2, and you can just go, all right, Briar for 3, right? And then you obviously 1 plus 2 plus 3 is 6 prize cards, so you take 6 before they do. So that is the situation where as long as you're taking like the first prize card, you should be fine. And if you aren't taking the first prize card, as long as you're taking the first 2 prize cards, you should be fine. And then against Greninja Blaziken, this was a pretty tough matchup, as the game was bugging out a lot and we had a really slow start. So we had a great turn 1, we were able to set up Sylveon. But after that we got Iono'd into just nothing and had to attach past 2 turns in a row. So they were able to go down to, I think, 3 prize cards to our 6. And then after a few turns we found ourselves in a situation where they were on 1 prize card and we were on 4. And then we were able to do some Iono and Angelite shenanigans, which bought us a bunch of time. And since we were shuffling the energy back into the deck, they weren't able to use the Blaziken to actually attach the energies to their Pokemon from the discard pile, as they were all stuck in the deck. And because of that, we were able to take the dub over that, which was a very sketchy matchup. Thankfully, we were able to pull through, and I have to shout out Sylveon for that matchup, because without Sylveon, we were not winning that at all. Then Raging Bolt in round 3 kind of went the same as Raging Bolt in round 1, where we were able to win up on the prize trade. I don't think we used Briar honestly, in this tournament. And then in round 3, we had Raging Bolt again, and this matchup just felt perfectly fine, as we were able to, I'm pretty sure, take the first 2 prize cards again, and just from there we were able to just go, I think we went Terapagos, and then we went Clefairy, and then Terapagos again, or something like that. Then we had our 1 loss in the tournament, which was to Alcaladon, as we forgot to check in, and unfortunate, but that is what happened. We were busy playing ladder, and then lost our matchup to the check-in button. And then round 5, we played against Garchomp. Unfortunately, Garchomp kind of bricked, and we were able to just completely steamroll them by just burning charging like 5 times in a row. Dragapult Goldengo is a pretty easy matchup as well, as your burning charge does 130, and Goldengo has 260 health and is weak to fire, so you can do the basic math there. We are actually hitting exactly 260 damage to one-shot their Goldengo, and because of that, we were able to, take early knockout onto the Goldengo, going down to 4 prize cards, and then from there we were able to keep up the prize trade. Also with Terapagos helped us out being able to gust up their Pheasantipity, and then Terapagos just went for the knockout. That I'm pretty sure Terapagos took 4 prize cards in this matchup, so yeah, shout out Terapagos in that matchup as well. And then after that we played against Okidogi. He found nothing, and we were just able to get a turn 1 attack off straight away. I'm pretty sure we attacked with Sylveon or something and just completely just one-shot him because of the weakness as well. And it was a really cool deck, but unfortunately he did brick, and we were able to take the win there. And then in top cut, this was a top 8 cut, we played against Yanmega, and Yanmega honestly felt a little bit sketchy, but because Burning Charge wouldn't one-shot the Yanmega if they set up. But the thing is that Yanmega takes so long to set up, and they're doing 210, so as long as we don't bench these 210 or less HP EXs, they have to take 1 prize card from there and then power up their Iron Hands. But by that time, when they move the energy to the Iron Hands, we can just one-shot the Iron Hands on the bench and then just go on from that, which is kind of cool. Another thing I learned in this matchup is the Leafeon is quite good in this matchup, as so they usually get 4 energy out, maybe sometimes 5, and thanks to that, we can usually just go, alright, boss up the Iron Hands and just one-shot it with Verdant Storm, I think that's the attack, which is the Leafeon's attack that does 60 damage per energy attached to your opponent's Pokemon, which was really nice. And then there was a lot of times where they would even have 5 because they'd manual attach the turn before, and then because of that we'd be doing 300 damage, so we could even one-shot the Yanmega with that. Otherwise we can just go Carnelian, and if we ever set up a board state with 2 Flareons, this matchup shouldn't be losable because they have no way to one-shot our Flareon. And then because we set up double Flareon, we can just go Carnelian into Carnelian, and then again Carnelian to close out the game usually. But yeah, so matchup felt fine. Both of the rounds went similar. I mean, both of the games were quite similar to that. And then in top 4, I had a coaching session, side to drop, and yeah, womp womp. Alright, moving into the matchups. Dragapult is one of the easier matchups for the deck. Thanks to Dragapult being a very common matchup, Dogbox can abuse this and get some relatively easy wins. I do think this matchup is a little bit more difficult if you're not running the Water Pond, but yeah, if you are running the Water Pond, then honestly this matchup shouldn't be too difficult, as they usually aren't going to be benching the Shaman, and if they do, then we can just go that Burning Charge route, take 130 damage, move energy to a Sylveon maybe, Burning Charge again, take another prize card, move energy elsewhere, and then from there they'll go Dragapult Phantom Dive, but they're not going to be able to take a knockout, and then we'll go, alright, Magical Charm, 320, take out the Dragapult, and then from there close out the game on whatever they promote, as we'll still have a Flareon that has probably full HP on the bench and be able to just close out the game like that. So this matchup is quite nice. If you guys do want to pause and just read through what I say here, this matchup is fine as long as you practice it, and you should be able to win it quite consistently. Moving forward, we have the Raging Bolt matchup. I feel like I've spoken enough about this matchup that we don't have to touch on it too much, as Briar is just a great card in this matchup. If you take the first prize card, then you go 1, 2, 3, and otherwise you can just go 2, 2, 2. So yeah. Something else that is quite cool is going second. You can actually attack on your first turn with Burning Charge, but that's like more of a thing just with this deck in general. Going second, it does have that potential because we do have the Terror Orb and we have quite a few EVs. So if we do start that 50 HP Eevee, we can evolve on our first turn, Crispin onto it, and then Burning Charge turn 1 going second. Then we have the Grimstnarl matchup. Grimstnarl is one of those decks right now that is seeing a lot of play, and if you don't have an answer to Grimstnarl, I don't think the deck that you're playing is good. because this deck is scary. He's a big dog right now. He is one of the other dogs in the pound right now. So the Eevee box does have a good matchup into it right now because, as we say, we have the Water Pond in that early game to put pressure on that. Now he has to find Shame, he has to find multiple attackers. If he doesn't, then we can just Angelite those attackers back into the deck, and then he has nothing. So it is kind of like a rock, paper, scissors kind of thing. Like, if you put down Shaman, then I'm going to just shuffle back both of your like Morgrims or whatever, and if you don't put down Shaman and focus more on the Morgrims, then I'm going to take 2 prize cards early on. So yeah, another thing you can do is just go Burning Charge, same thing. That's kind of like the similar thing to most evolution matchups, and then from there, instead of like Dragapult where you go into Magical Charm Sylveon, you're just going to go into the, I forgot what the second attack of Leaf Dog is, but you're just going to attack with Leaf Dog, second attack, which does 230 with no drawbacks, plus heal 100 from each of your benched, and that kind of eliminates this Monkey Man's kind of business, because he kind of, you know, flings his stuff onto your bench, and we can be like, nuh-uh, and heal all of that off, and then we kind of do just... And then we do kind of just end up beating this deck because of our Leaf Dog and his second attack, because we are one-shotting this guy for like 460 damage, so he is very dead, and then healing off all of his little damage residue. So yeah, great matchup for us, to be honest, as long as we are able to set up Leaf Dog. And another thing is we want to be able to swing into a Grimst first. I don't recommend setting up Leaf Dog if he's going to get the first hit into you, because otherwise you only get one swing and one knockout into a Grimst, and that feels quite bad. So I feel like you do want to kind of just put your Leafeon into play out of nowhere by just going the 50 HP Eevee, evolve into the Leaf Dog, Crispin for 2 energy plus Crystal, and then you have your Leaf Dog being able to laugh at this dude and just take double knockout and heal off a lot of the damage that he has already done. So yeah, that is that matchup. Then we have the Godof matchup, and I'm not gonna lie, I haven't played this matchup once, and I'm not gonna lie, I haven't played this matchup much, so this is kind of speaking out of my arse over here, and is just a very on-paper theory crafting kind of matchup. Same thing with most Evo decks, you can just go Burning Charge Water Pond. They don't have a great way to one-shot your Pokemon, which is only the Balloon, and if they do that, then we can kind of just go, alright, Countercatcher, Angelite, shuffle back the Gardevoir, and shuffle back the Balloon with all of the energy. So now in their deck, they have like 5 or 6 Psychic Energy plus the Gardevoir, and then from there we can kind of just go Magical Charm, and then next turn Angelite again. So, because they do run out of resources towards the end of the game, as remember, this deck doesn't have access to the drawing cards curly anymore, as now they rely on those like researchers and stuff. So if they ever like just run out of supporters and run out of ways to discard the energy, actually, we can find ourselves just winning because we shuffled back all of the energy back into the deck. Like, if their deck is quite thin and you see they've used 3 like researchers, they've used their secret box, they've used ultra balls and stuff, they might just genuinely not have a way to get that energy back into the discard to use Psychic Embrace again. So yeah, and then like I said, we can use Water Pond early on in the game, Burning Charge, all that kind of stuff. And another thing is we can kind of just swing with, if they don't have monkeys set up, then we can kind of just like swing with Terapagos or swing with Leaf Dog to just put pressure onto the Gardevoir, and then from there we can even do Briar stuff later on, as we do have... If they don't have double monkey set up, then Carnelian plus Briar is a way to actually get rid of the Gardevoir, as if they only have 1 monkey set up, then when they go Psychic Embrace to the Gardevoir, it'll still have 30 damage on it. And obviously Flareon does 280, so we can do some basic math there and then just slap a Briar down, and then because the Briar and the Carnelian doing 280, we can take 3 prize cards off of the Guardi. So yeah, this matchup really shouldn't be too difficult. I have played the matchup, but like, it didn't feel that bad. I've also played on stream quite a bit. Like, the matchup doesn't feel too bad, but I can definitely see how it can get a bit difficult if they do set up faster than you do. Moving on to the mirror match. The mirror match actually, weirdly enough, should be favored for us, as usually they're not going to be playing the Water Pond, and this deck doesn't play Shaman, so it is still a terror-based matchup, so going first is still incredibly important. If you aren't going first, it can still be bad, but yeah, we have a lot more ways to actually take the 2/2/2, as if they don't bench a 2-prizer, then we can just go, alright, cool, Water Pond for 2, and if they do bench the 2-prizer, then we can always just go Counter Catcher and knock out both of their Hootoots, and because of that, usually they're not going to have much of a response, as if they don't have Hootoots, they don't have ways to find cards. So yeah, if we just go knock out double Hootoot, and then after that go Angelite, shuffle their attackers, usually we just win the game there, I'm not gonna lie. So yeah. And then moving on to the potential techs. This is a deck that I'm considering for Worlds, and the main tech I would have considered would be the Water Pond, which I've already included in the deck, and I have explained it enough to not have to explain it again. We have Kieran. Kieran is great because it counts as a switch out for when we use Carnelian and have to pivot, and it also is a plus 30, which is great for our 280 attack to be able to hit 310, being able to one-shot cards like the Godof. Ursaluna is also another good attacker, but the thing is, with this deck, you usually close out the games with the Briar or other things, since this deck doesn't have that much of a need to be able to swing for like 240 at the end of the game without much setup, as our Pokemon stay in play for longer than Terra Boxes. So Terra Box loves Ursaluna because they usually don't have an attacker towards the end of the game, as they just go turn by turn. So this deck doesn't really go turn by turn, as it is kind of building up towards the end game. I feel like this deck has a much stronger end game than it does have a beginning of the game, whereas Terra Box is the other way around. And then Rigid Band is another decent attacker. Rigid Band is another decent tech, and I'm not gonna lie, one of the matchups that I struggled against was Mewtwo, funnily enough. Mewtwo, if we don't take the first 2 prize cards, we kind of just lose, because they're able to one-shot us, and if they just take the, like, Oko on us, and take the first 2, usually they can just chain Mewtwo's, right? Which is kind of difficult for us to deal with. However, Rigid Band now means we take 30 less from attacks, so which is great, because now our dogs can survive these hits. All our Pokemon go up to 300 HP basically, so which is really nice, because Mewtwo now only swings for 280, and then they just can't one-shot us. Another nice thing would be in the mirror match, in the Flareon mirror match, they swing for 280, and that is just not one-shotting us anymore, which is super nice. Another thing we could use would be the that vest, the Defiance vest, which now does minus 40, which is quite nice, because now we could be surviving hits from cards like Pikachu EX, but that means we have to be behind, so that is still an option. Another thing would be Palpad. Palpad is quite explanatory in these kinds of decks. It just lets you reuse cards like your Ionos, like your bosses, and if you're forced to like Ultra Ball away your Briar at the beginning of the game to actually set up an attacker or whatever, now you can just Palpad it back, so you don't really have to worry about that too much, and it just lets you use a lot more resources throughout the game. Umbreon EX is a card that I don't think I'll ever include, but a lot of people were saying that you should be playing this for the Gotti matchup, but I don't think it's necessary, as it does 160 damage plus Confusion, is a dark type, and like, sure, this might help your Gotti matchup and it might help your Mewtwo matchup, but I feel like a card like the Kieran or the Black Belt's Training, which is just plus 40 to EXs, might just be worth more, as it's a lot easier to set up than a 3 energy cost Pokemon that now you have to evolve, and against other matchups is just fodder, right? So the Black Belt's Training is similar to the Kieran, it just does plus 40, so now you can be hitting that 320 number with the Carnelian, meaning you're one-shotting Grimst and also Depult. So another cool thing would be that the Charizard Dragapult matchup might seem difficult on paper, but then we have to go back to our Leaf Dog. Leaf Dog can one-shot the Charizard, which is great, and then we obviously have Sylveon to deal with the Dragapult half of the deck. So this deck just has so many options and so many ways to deal with the format currently, and I'm really surprised it's not seeing more play, as the deck is just fun in itself. And it is really consistent, because you are running that Noctowl engine, you are running that Fan Rotom, which just lets you set up in most of the games. But yeah, so moving forward, just like Terra Box, thanks to the versatility this deck has, Flareon will just be a great deck, and it could be a contender in the coming formats, as it will just be able to adapt with many different attackers, and Flareon being just such an easy setup energy accelerator. It reminds me of Arceus, and I think that we just haven't yet learned the full potential of Flareon itself, because being able to do 130 and also accelerate energy to wherever you really want is just incredibly strong, and I genuinely think that Flareon, if not The entire deck has a great future, but Flareon in itself, I think, will find its way into a lot more decks in the future, as it is just such a low maintenance, great attacker. Alright, but yeah, that is all from me today. Thanks for watching. If you guys enjoyed, please do subscribe, and we'll be uploading a lot more content recently. So yeah, peace.